Anthony Dickens brought his circle guitar.
There's a motorized wheel that spins around and it strikes the strings. And so you can play with two hands. So you see how that's spinning. Oh man!
Max Aday invented something called vocal cords.
There's 3 strings that are all conductive rubber cord stretch sensors. So as you pull on the strings, you can control how the voice is being processed.
That's cool.
I wonder how much a Grammy weighs.
Yeah.
What about the pleasantness of the sound? Some of these things sound a little weird.
Many of them sound weird. We are very open-minded in the competition.
Do any of these things ever go on to a post-competition life?
Yes, they do.
For example, you may remember the tube-like contraption called a talk box, made famous by Peter Frampton in 1975.
Bosco.
In 2020, Bosco Conte won the contest with a smaller, more portable device.
You don't even need to know how to play. Oh, wow.
Called the Electro Spit.
So that was not your voice.
Let's move on here. It's just another invention. Another invention by mankind.
When art and design and engineering and music all come together.
In second place, the Babble Table. In first place,
And finally, the first place prize goes to vocal cords.
And congratulations! New music is born!
Thank you so much. Oh my God. Wow. Thank you.
The all-new CBS Evening News every weeknight.
Artist. It is a notorious business and difficult to navigate, especially back then, especially for her. You weren't just a woman, you were a black woman. Are you saying you faced like things coming at you, sexism, racism?
I have had every ism to deal with, from ageism young to ageism old, sexism, racism, pessimism, optimism, and what I've found is that the moment you let yourself be defined by your isms is when you've lost.
DePass always persevered. She was also a good persuader, convincing Diana Ross that the song I'm Coming Out would be a smash hit. When she first heard it, what was her reaction?
She says in very blatant terms, I hate these songs.
But you knew it would be a hit?
But I felt it would be. Nobody knows. That's the thing about it. Nobody knows.
But clearly you have really good...
I believe in what I believe in, and some of it works and some of it doesn't. But I'm happy to say I have a good percentage.
In 1982, DePass was made president of Motown Productions. One of her first big projects, the TV special Motown 25, Yesterday, Today, Forever. Nearly 50 million people watch Michael Jackson do this. The first time you saw that moonwalk, what was your reaction?
Oh my God. And it was only 6 seconds. But the whole Billie Jean of it all was just magic.
Why was it magic?
I think because nobody had ever seen anything like that before.
She also produced the landmark miniseries Lonesome Dove. A lot of people would ask, what does Motown know about Westerns?
Probably nothing, but I did. I think the death of art is that you have to be gay to play gay. I think the death of art is that you have to be black to direct or write a black movie. the death of art is to not have the best person do what it is they are well suited and passionate to do, regardless of all that other exterior stuff. And I am sick of it.
At 78, she's still listening to her ear and gut, finding new opportunities and stories to tell. And with her induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Suzanne DePass is recognized as a true pioneer.
I am so grateful to have had that moment, to really feel that energy coming back to me. You know, I will also say I have worked really, really hard.
For someone who worked behind the scenes and in the shadows, you felt seen.
Oh, definitely. I felt very seen and very blessed.
If you or a loved one have had a
hit the ground.
The Learjet 55 crashed into a busy section of the city, destroying cars and setting buildings ablaze. A horrifying end to the deadliest week in American aviation in decades.
It's just scary to think like maybe flying isn't the best thing to do right now.
Rattling an already shaken nation looking for answers in the wake of Wednesday's mid-air collision. An Army Black Hawk helicopter colliding with an American Airlines regional jet over the icy Potomac River in the nation's capital. 67 people died just feet from the runway. It appears to have happened about 325 feet up, higher than the helicopter was supposed to be. Investigators say they are working to understand if the controller had accurate information about the helicopter's altitude moments before the crash. On Wednesday night, there were 5 people in Washington's Reagan National Tower. The controller handling helicopter traffic was doing a second job, monitoring takeoffs and landings of some airliners. Nationally, 90% of air traffic control towers are commonly understaffed. Also, the chopper crew indicated they had the passenger plane in sight, but were they looking at a different plane? Todd Inman is leading the NTSB investigation. There is a real desire to get answers for these folks.
This shouldn't happen. Unfortunately, this is a tragedy, but from this we will learn. It's one of the reasons why it's been so long since we've had another accident.
A week that brought an unparalleled period of aviation safety in the United States to an end leaves an important question, one we put to former acting FAA Administrator Billy Nolen. Are we less safe getting on an airplane today than we were a week ago?
We are not. Our system is designed around robustness and resilience. In the past 16 years, 13 plus billion people have gotten on flights. That's almost twice the population of the planet. You only do that if you've got a system that's safe.
Okay, you had a system that's safe. It's obvious that you no longer have a 100% system that's safe, because if you did, these occurrences wouldn't just happen like they have in America, just within a 48-hour period, but they're happening all over the world, where planes are just dropping out of the sky, and maybe they're not actually wrecking, but we hear these incidences happening all the time. And I've said this like no more than 3 or 4 days ago regarding these incidences, and then sure enough, this happens. So whenever I'm talking about the spiritual world pertaining to Satan coming down in great wrath, I know what I'm talking about. Whenever I talk about the displacencies of the weather patterns pertaining to Satan involved in these things, towards ripping and tearing up towns and communities, drowning them, making it so hot that you can't even stand it, or causing massive fires or floods, I know what I'm talking about. We're under attack. We are under a spiritual demonic attack that the Bible has warned us about, and nobody has taken these things literally as it is now occurring. Whenever the woman before this, talking about music and art and all that other stuff, said that she was basically tired of it, using it in an expression of a good way, I'm tired of it too. And I know God's tired of it, because we continue to keep avoiding the people that we want to avoid by stereotyping them, in which that's fine. You know, it's all pertaining to free will. But you must identify where the core of origin began, and you must, for surely you can identify where society has went wrong here in America that has put us where we are. Right now, Donald Trump is stirring up more by changing the global international standards, by putting tariffs on everything that could actually backfire on the American people up 100 to 1. And he don't realize that. He still thinks that America is still the predominant nation that it was before 1988. He still thinks that we're ahead of everything and everybody pertaining to the smokestack industry. And I got news for Donald Trump. He is behind times whenever it comes to stuff like that. There's no doubt both parties, regardless whether it's red or blue, have made a total mess out of this thing, not just here in America, but globally, worldwide, and we are feeling and seeing the effects, and people cannot deny that. It is an undeniable reality. And if we, the people, aren't willing to substitute and evolve into that reality, well then it's nobody's fault but our own. I personally think that by him doing what he's doing, I've already seen increases of gas prices on the pump, probably about 25 cents, and that's just been within the past 24, 48 hours of whenever Donald Trump put some of these laws in place pertaining to these tariffs. You keep in mind, two people can play the same game. Now, Mexico has done come back, making their statements and accusations pertaining to what's going on about the tariffs. Canada has already spoke out about the tariffs. And it's just a matter of time before China's going to speak out. So in actuality, what Donald J. Trump is doing, he's cutting our own throats over here. And I have said that all along in looking at this situation, that there was no way to repair this situation other than going green and going with stuff like Elon Musk pertaining to social media. In other words, re-revolutionizing the world. Starting out with a revival in Christ for the Lord Jesus Christ, and then evolving into a full revolution. And if we're not willing to do that, folks, we're going to only see more and more drastic things that's going to happen to us here in the Western world. I hate to say that, and these are not things that I wish, because I wish that the so-called Christians and the politics would have grabbed a hold of this message going all the way back to the late 80s, early 90s, but they never did. They never did. They looked at it as in, well, this ain't what we've been taught. This isn't the norm. This isn't, we all thought that we was just going to vanish and disappear, and every molecule in our body was instantaneously going to be changed from mortal to immortal, and we was going to go to heaven and live with God and never see any more pain or anguish or pain again. Pain, anguish, or sorrow, or misery again. That's what we have been taught over here in the Western world, probably ever since about the 70s. I know it's been that way since the 80s. Ever since that movie come out pertaining to Left Behind. And I wish that what they're talking about is true. But the fact of the matter is, if you put your thinking cap on, please listen to me for a second. If you put your thinking cap on, whenever God comes back in a rage, and I mean he's sitting there right now with his finger on the button, just waiting to tell Gabriel to blow the trumpet. I mean, we are that close towards walking off into the millennium. the 1,000-year millennium. But before we get to the 1,000-year millennium, there's going to be 7 dark years upon this planet like humanity has never seen before, because of these hard-headed, evil, demonic people, and because of people sinning and ain't willing to conform. And that's that way in India. That's that way in the Middle East. That's that way in other countries, including Mexico and Canada, including China. Matter of fact, I just seen a thing this morning where Taiwan has now legalized same-sex marriages. They've been working on it now for 10 years, and I guess their authorities over there finally figured out, well, they're not going to give up. They're determined that the guy gays is going to marry the guy gays, and the lesbian gays are going to marry the lesbian gays, and they're calling love, love. That's one of the things that I noticed, that they're calling love, love. And the Bible don't dispute that. A matter of fact, if anything, the Bible supports that. It supports the factor that love is love, but it's not the right kind of love. It's not the agape love. It's not the righteous, holy, eternal love that the Holy Father intended for everybody to be a part of. Because whenever the Bible says that I'd rather you be either be hot or cold, indicating that God himself would prefer us all to be hot. But if you're not going to be hot, he'd rather you be on the cold side than you be in the lukewarm side. That's where we're at right now as a society, and it's backfiring on everybody. And I'm just afraid that the things that Donald Trump is doing right now pertaining to his administration with all these tariffs, we ain't seen nothing yet pertaining to it backfiring. Now, I've said all along that if you put both parties in power at the same time, nobody's going to be able to wave a magic wand over America's problems, and suddenly they're just going to go away, and we're going to go back to living like we did before COVID ever hit. COVID should have been a wake-up call for everybody. 9/11 should have been a wake-up call for everybody. The ending of the Cold War should have been a wake-up for everybody. And people aren't listening. And most importantly, they're not activating their movement from what they hear. So that's telling me that in reality, they really don't believe either the Bible, or they don't believe people such as myself that keeps talking about environmental changes, or they just don't believe reality in its fullest form. Like Donald J. Trump still walking around being a climate denier, why Donald J. Trump still walking around basically being a denier towards saying that the election was stolen. When is the world going to awaken in getting out of the lies and the deceit that the devil has put forth in bringing destruction into mankind? That's my $1 million question. And it does make people like me sick whenever you have such of a passion to want to do something for God that's going to help the people, but the people don't want to support your dream. The people don't want to support your desire. The people don't want to support your passion. Regardless whether it's a passion of dancing, regardless whether it's a passion of making music, regardless whether it's a passion that you want to be a farmer, regardless whether it's a passion that you want to study and be a journalist, regardless whether it's a passion that you want to study and become a lawyer or a surgeon, I just don't understand how come people, whenever it's talking about true holy righteousness of God, how that they will bitter up and turn their backs and give people the cold shoulder whenever it comes to the true identical message coming out of the Bible. Other than going back to what Jesus said. You may be saying, what did Jesus say? What did Jesus say? Jesus said that humanity loves darkness rather than they love light. Now, based upon that, yes, the Bible does speak in symbolical forms about free will. But the Bible also speaks about choosing the wrong choices in your free will of what the consequences are going to be. And that's the part that the preachers and the teachers and all these other people don't resonate. These are the victims. the thing about the victims, we're all victims in this. We are all victims. We may not be victims verbatim
century.
as far as seeing some of the horrors that's befalling up onto the planet right now, regardless whether it's coming in the form of fires or floods, hurricanes or tornadoes or whatever, as far as the forces of nature. But we're also seeing the damages coming to humanity pertaining to just stuff like chicken flu, the chicken flu, or the pandemic, or other diseases that is spreading all over the world right now in massive forms that scientists are just, they're just memorized by these things because they don't realize what's actually occurring, and we know what's occurring. The planet has become unstable. The planet is no longer in the same norm that it used to be pertaining to its temperatures, and because of it, it makes more allergies and viruses and all kinds of other things that's going to creep up into our lives that now are going to haunt us. What did the Bible say? The Bible says that in the last days that there would be plagues, there would be famines, there would be diseases, there would be wars, there would be rumors of wars, there would be problems, there would be issues. But it also talks about peace. Not man-made peace, but true, holy, eternal, godly peace. And until people are willing to change, they'll never see that peace, not in this world. Not the way that this world is steadily approaching right now in the direction that it's in right now.
Their car was the first off the starting line in 1957.
That was how this started, was he emailed me the newsreel and said, Joe owns this, we could do the Miele, and it was kind of like, oh, you're just using this for directions.
We're going to move on right here. One of my concerns pertaining to the two aviation events that's happened this year, or within the past 48 hours this week, is we got the greatest technology in the world that should have sent off some sort of alarms or beeping sounds or lights going off and on. That helicopter should not have been in that area, knowing how fluctuating that the air traffic is in that area. There should have been some sort of an extra safety feature on the system itself. And I still say that you could actually train AI, if you know what you was doing, to the degree that it could actually take the biggest part of replacement in all these towers, these control towers that are basically managing these crucial flights coming in and out of not just America but the world, and probably do it more efficiently and effectively. In other words, it wouldn't cost as much, and you wouldn't have near as many catastrophes. Now that's my point of view of it, and of course I'm just a regular person with another opinion, but we're fixing to touch off on something right here, talking about diseases, of what I'm talking about, of the planet warming, and it's creating more allergies, it's creating more infections, it's creating substances up onto the planet that ordinarily mankind didn't have to deal with, that now mankind is having to deal with. Please watch.
And a policy across administrations with the USDA that this...
Let's go back. We want to get all of this. This is crucial, pertaining to people's health. Oh, right there.
Here for clean.
Go forward. Right there.
With a worrisome outbreak of bird flu making headlines almost daily, Martha Teichner tells us what it all means and what might come next.
There are 7 generations
coming near a neighborhood near you. Whenever I say stuff like that, people think, well, he's just talking about this. He's just talking about that. Oh, no, no, no. I'm talking about all the above. I'm talking about survival in its fullest form becoming tainted or compromised if we continue on the road that we're on right now. And I'm just not talking about 1 million+ people dying in America pertaining to COVID. We're talking about hundreds, dozens, if not hundreds of millions of people that's going to be affected if we continue on this path that we're on. And I think a great deal of scientists knows this, but because they can't verbatim come out and prove it yet, because we're not in that mold, they're being hesitant towards wanting to put out the warnings to the people. But I'm telling you right now, the things that God has showed me that's coming over the horizon is not going to be pretty. And whenever you're talking about people being superstitious, you know, there was superstitiousness pertaining to bringing in the Social Security number here in America. Whenever the Social Security number first got introduced, there was superstitiousness about the chips that everybody said, "Oh no, we're not going to take the chip. We're not going to take the chip." Well, today they not only took the chip, but they're buying the chip, because everywhere you walk around, you got a chip in your phone. So these scientists or these people that has this technology, they couldn't give it to them, so now they're selling it to them. All right, let's go back to something else. Let's look at whenever God comes back in flaming fire, taking vengeance upon this world of those that don't serve him and those that don't want to serve him. Every living thing down here is going to be, that's burnable, going to be burned up. Everything. Other than see thou hurt not the oil nor the wine. See thou hurt not the ground that the oil's in, and see thou hurt not the wine pertaining to the vegetation. Everything else is going to be burned up. So whenever it comes to the chips, they're going to be ineffective. So humanity is going to have to regroup down here. And they're going to have a lot of problems in regrouping towards building all these space stations and putting satellites back up into the air and basically operating on the same level that they do now pertaining to the digital world. So what's going to occur during this time of chaos that's going to happen down here on the planet? People are going to be desperate. And they are eventually, they're going to mobilize. They're going to be able to mobilize. They'll be sleeping underground or in tents or whatever at first. But whenever it comes to the digital era will not be effective in that length of time, because they won't have enough time to make all the satellites and put them back up into the air towards things operating the way that they do today regarding artificial intelligence. So whenever the Bible talks about the New World Order, everybody's got it wrong. Everybody's got it wrong. Because it's not going to be the Social Security number. It's not going to be a chip embedded into your brain or into your hand. It's going to be an actual brand. That's what the Bible prefers whenever it talks about a mark. If you look the word mark up, go back until its originality, it's talking about a brand. Just like if you was to brand a cow and put X on it, or G, or D, or whatever your name is, beginning with the first letter, and how that they used to brand cows, and I guess they probably still do to this day. In certain areas, they probably still brand them, depending upon where you're at. Usually they put a marker now in their ear, and usually farmers, believe it or not, put other types of inventions either in or on cattle and horses and stuff like that, and dogs, to be able to make sure that they can keep up with them. And sometimes that's usually chips. But once more, these chips won't be available. And that's the part that the people don't understand. These chips will not be available, and you may say, why not? Because we're talking about going back to a primitive state, back into the Dark Ages. And I know people say, oh yeah, I believe the Bible. Do you really? Do you really understand what's really at the point of no return right now? Not only on the path that we're on, but on the path that we're going to pursue in the exchange when God gets tired of all this and he tells Gabriel to blow the trumpet, and the dead in Christ shall rise first, and those who are alive and remain, which will be limited. It ain't going to be everybody, because you're going to have to meet the criteria of being able to go to heaven. You're going to have to fit into a certain slot of worthiness in the eyes of the Almighty to be changed from mortal to immortal instantaneously, wherever molecule in your body will be changed. And in addition to that, even if you are caught up in that event that a lot of them call the rapture, that the word rapture ain't even in the Bible, the taking away, you're still going to have to die to the flesh. Why is that? Because the Bible says that no sin shall enter into the kingdom of God. Your spirit, your soul, your identity of who you are, that'll enter into the kingdom of God. But as far as your flesh ain't gonna enter into the heavens. That's the reason why so many people, I find it to be almost laughable that so many people thinks that either Elijah or some other prophet that's died thousands of years ago is going to come back in a physical form. Once you go through that transformation period, you can't be transformed back into a earthly form. There are certain things that is limited. Now, God could have created another Adam rather than using Mother Mary, but by doing so, he would have been breaking the agreement, I guess you would call it agreement, or the contract, if you want to call it a contract. Whenever all this stuff first come about, whenever Lucifer challenged God towards contaminating humanity, because God originally did make humanity with a soul of the first Adam by breathing life into the ground and creating humanity. Do you not think that God could have done that in bringing forth Christ into the world? Sure, he could have. Why didn't he? Has anybody ever thought that out? Why didn't God create Christ just by inventing Christ the same way that he invented Adam? Because it had to come down through the gene pool. That's where God started all this, with the gene pool of only doing it once, and then he recreated Eve because God seen that Eve or God seen that where Adam was lonely, he created Eve for a helpmate. And we've gone from generation to generation, to culture, from continent to continent to where we are today. These diseases that I'm talking about is all part of the prophecies that the Bible talks about as far as plagues, famines, earthquakes, harsh storms, events. That when you shall see these things starting to occur, don't return back to get thy cloak or thy clothes. If you be on top of a house, do not come down. That wherever that you are, whenever this event happens, and it can happen instantaneously, globally, all over the world, or it can happen like it's happening right now in different forms in different areas all over the world. Now, how come people that claims that has a relationship with God and supposedly has faith can't see that? We're fixing to dig off into something right here that I personally believe could actually make COVID, could actually make the Spanish flu look like child's play. I'm not saying that it's going to occur pertaining to the chicken flu, but I'm just saying something is brewing, and why it's brewing is because we are no longer dealing with the norms. The norms in the temperatures, the norms in the atmosphere, the norms in all the above. And if people aren't willing to adjust or evolve, they'll either die or be left behind. I hate to say that. And their death will be just as the death talks about in the Bible, where Christ said that you will die in your sins. In other words, you won't die as a hero trying to save a bunch of children from a burning bus. You won't die as a hero trying to drag somebody out of a burning house. You won't die as a hero towards standing up for different rights, humanitarian rights, like a lot of these soldiers that's had to die in the past towards dying as a hero. You'll just die. And it'll be a waste to that flesh in actuality, because you could have died a glorious death in trying to save somebody out of a burning bus. You could have died a glorious death by trying to do whatever for your country. But whenever you have people that are so mixed up and are so confounded, so confused, They don't know what to. They don't know who to believe. They don't know what to believe. They don't know. They don't know. They're just, it's almost like they're staggering around like a bunch of drunk people. Why is that? Because a major move did not occur that should have occurred in 1988. That did not occur, and certain people right here in Northwest Tennessee thought that they had the tiger by the tail, and now they're realizing instead of them having the tiger by the tail the whole time, the tiger had them by the tail, and now they're feeling the repercussions of it in every level, on every perspective you can think of. This is just going to be another one of them right here. Please listen.
In the Aquabog, Long Island Town Cemetery. Their graves overlook the farm that's been in the family since the 1640s.
Whose idea was it to put the ducks on the tombstone?
I'm gonna say it was my grandfather's idea, because he did it first.
It was Doug Corwin's great-grandfather who started raising ducks in 1908, when Long Island was famous for its duck farms. Now, Crescent Duck Farm is the only one left. It produced 1 million ducks a year until 2 weeks ago, when bird flu shut the farm down.
Dozens of state and federal agricultural workers dressed in biohazard suits, sanitized boots, and gloves are assisting in the euthanization of the entire flock here, 100,000 ducks.
I saw a flock one day that was great, and the next day was lethargic, wasn't eating. And it looked like something I'd never seen.
Whether it's ducks or chickens, since the current strain of bird flu, H5N1, reached the United States in 2022, over 148 million birds have been euthanized.
148 million, and you're wondering how come you're seeing destabilizing prices at the grocery store? Listen to more of this.
It's a staggering number, there's no doubt, but it is and always has been a policy across administrations with the USDA that this is how they handle infections like this among poultry.
Jody Guest is a professor of epidemiology with Emory University's Rollins School of Public Health in Atlanta.
And as we've seen bird flu move species, it becomes even more important to try to contain that infection in the flocks that it's in so that we don't continue to see spread.
Except that's exactly what has happened.
It actually was in all 50 states by the end of 2023.
Transmitted by wild birds through their feces and saliva.
So in 2024, we saw bird flu jump from our poultry and wild birds to mammals, to cows. And that was a very startling change.
Now, I've heard various people ask the question, what's poisoning the people? What's killing us? And most people want to point their fingers at whatever government that they're under towards saying it's the government's fault. Don't trust the government. Well, whenever the government is not listening to the professional world, then I guess in a sense, the government is killing us. The government is allowing for this to occur because they're not acting appropriately in not just the diseases in a direct form, but in an indirect form towards what is escalating all the diseases, what is escalating the bacteria and the allergies and all the above. People have not awoken since the pandemic got introduced to the world. And because of it, they're still going in the wrong direction. Now, whenever I talk about love pertaining to agape love, for Christ said, what greater love hath there than a person that's willing to lay down their lives for their brother or their sister. That's the most powerful, strongest love above and beyond all loves. Well, that was the love that I was displaying here for the past 30 plus years that got rejected, got denied. Did not nobody want to support that love because they looked at that love and said, wow, that's too strong. Matter of fact, one of my bosses in Phoenix, Arizona, while working for Bill Luke Chrysler Dodge, had already discussed this with somebody. I don't know who. And now it becomes a conversation with us. towards us talking about it, pertaining to the activity that the Windmill Ministries Missions has been involved in for the past 30 plus years. And his bottom line was, it's too strong. It's too it's too intense. And because of it, that's the reason why nobody has wanted to support you. Well, you got two choices. You can either support the Windmill Ministries that has always supported a true agape love and peace through the precious Holy Spirit of God, or you can continue on this path that you're on towards seeing that many more casualties all over the world. And whenever people like China, that just recently opened up another portal as far as saying, oh yeah, same-sex marriages, we're going to tolerate that. You know, Russia, if I'm not mistaken, they're anti-LGBTQ. And there's other countries out there that knows better than to participate in stuff like that. And it's not that it's not going on in their country, because I'm sure it is, either male or female. But as a whole, they don't practice that because they know that that is not only unnatural, though it may be a form of love, it is not the right love. It is not the agape love, the love that Christ said, because Christ said that, yes, even sinners love sinners. Wicked people love wicked people. Mean, cruel, indifferent people love cruel, indifferent people. But just because you have that form or type of love don't mean that you have the right type of love, and it sure don't mean that you're going to get any type of reward from the Heavenly Father because of that type of love. People need to understand that there's consequences in not doing the right thing. And that can be looked upon independently as one person on one-on-one, or it can be looked upon as being a community, or it can be looked upon as being a country, or it can be looked upon in a global fashion towards it being the whole world. And that's the direction that this Western country over here, pertaining to the Supreme Court during Obama, wanted to pass and say, oh, it's okay for same-sex marriages because now we can recognize one male marrying to another male, that if that male has any inheritance, that other male can inherit their inheritance because they're legally married. That was the only reason why that they done it, other than the form of turning wicked. They know that what that they was talking about towards legalizing and making it okay in the eyes of this government for two men to marry or for two women to marry, they knew that it was an abomination. It was an abomination, and they knew that. Well, those people up there in the Supreme Court, they're fairly, some of them are fairly good age. Do you think that they just dropped off the peanut farm yesterday and they're not aware of the commandments of God? And they're not aware of the recommendations coming from God? Sure they are. Sure they are. So whenever they done what they done, they opened up a portal. America opened up a portal. The Supreme Court opened up a portal.
Startling change.
Until 2024, there was only one human case in the United States. In just a few months, the number jumped to 67, with one death. Most of those cases, workers at dairy operations and poultry farms. They experienced mild symptoms.
Our food supply is being attacked, just like we're being attacked. I heard a report from the agriculture communities, I guess it was about a month ago, maybe a little bit shorter than that. I didn't record it, but I've seen it, what that they was promoting, and they was saying that on average, a third of the food that the agriculture communities at one time was producing for the rest of the world has been compromised because of the storms, because of the droughts, because of these major events that's been happening all over the world. Well, whenever you're steadily doing that in declining of the supply chain based upon supply and demand, you're going to see astronomical prices either in beef, poultry, or whatever. I mean, just like the large freeze that we had that went plumb on down and Panama City and Destin and I guess Tallahassee may have seen some snow. Somebody said that it was snowing in Miami for the first time. I don't know if that's true or not, but people get out and glorify that. They get out and play in the snow, and they're like children. They think, oh wow, what a great thing. And what they don't realize is that cold weather just got through affecting probably about a third, if not more, of their citrus down there. And now the next thing you know, oranges are already extraordinarily high. I never thought that I was going to be given more than $1 for an orange. The next thing you know, it'll be $3 for an orange. Why? Because the cold weather come all the way down there and it killed a lot of their citrus. People don't understand those things. We should be just as concerned of the weather moving one way abnormally as we do another, as we would be if it was a tornado or a hurricane. But we don't. You know why? Because society is not in check towards Mother Nature pertaining to what's happening. And whenever we see massive whales or seagulls, or well, not seagulls, but other types of stuff in the ocean that steadily is giving us signs towards what's going on, and we don't take notice of those signs in recognizing why they're doing this and what can we do to prevent from this continually happening so that this won't continue to happen, then we as a society are driving ourselves off the edge of the cliff, and we're too stupid to know it, or we're too hard-headed to admit it. And I tend to wonder which is more predominant, especially in this area, is pride cometh before a fall. And because these people are so prideful, they're not willing to admit that Dennis James Jackson, known as Juby, has been teaching a godly message, and that they was
I'm
wrong,
not scared. I feel
and that they was wrong, and that he was right, out of pride.
We stop it by knowing where it is and then eliminating, culling those herds and preventing its spread.
But the spread of H5N1 is not being contained. And look at what culling has already done to the price and availability of eggs.
According to the CBS News price tracker, a dozen eggs on average costs $4.15 today, compared to $2.51 just a year ago.
The issue has become politicized.
The Biden administration in the Department of Agriculture directed the mass killing of more than 100 million chickens, which has led to a lack of chicken supply in this country, therefore a lack of egg supply, which is leading to the shortage.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt last week. In fact, the first Trump administration followed the same policy.
I think the vaccine program's the only thing that's going to get us out of this.
The proposal is controversial. Allow poultry farmers to vaccinate their birds against H5N1, something theoretically doable, but currently forbidden, because it would cripple U.S. poultry exports to the many countries which ban vaccinated birds.
The disease is becoming much bigger than the export situation because the disease is so getting out of hand right now.
This is as far as we can go because of the quarantine.
Because of the quarantine, that's correct.
Doug Corwin can't decide which is worse, losing 100,000 ducks or having to lay off 48 people. You seem ambivalent about whether or not you even want to try again.
Martha, think about what I've been through over the last 2 weeks. It's devastating. Utterly devastating. It reminds me of losing both of my parents. You know, that sudden, that grief is that feeling that like you've lost something that's part of you.
I can relate to that loss because, you know, I've had losses, maybe not that substantial, but I'm sure everybody else has, and losses are grief. And he realizes that hit that he just got through hitting was basically going to end his career. In other words, he'll probably have to declare bankruptcy, and the next thing you know, get plumb out of the business. Or he could. I don't know. He may be tough enough that he overcomes, but it's gonna take a lot of sacrificing to be able to do that. A lot of sacrificing. And he knows that. And because of it, it's chilling. It's a hardship that he actually may not be able to recover from. Just like the hardship that has happened with these hurricanes, just like the hardship pertaining to all these other disasters that continue to keep hitting again and again and again. And I keep telling people we're being ravaged again and again and again by the devil. Not by God, but by the devil. Just as the Bible teaches that Satan will come down in great wrath in the last days. We are basically nothing more, the human race is nothing more, and all the other life upon this planet, we are nothing more than collateral damage whenever it comes to the spiritual war that began up in heaven, that Lucifer started. That the Antichrist, Lucifer, started. So whenever you get to looking at diseases, whenever you get to looking at pain, whenever you get to looking at hardship, these are all developments of Lucifer, not of God. Not of the Holy Father, but of the devil. And until people are willing to recognize that, regardless whether you be living in the Middle East, or you're over in Ukraine, or you're wherever, people needs to awaken. It's because we keep saying that democracy's on the line, democracy's on the line. It's more than just democracy's on the line. It's the survival of humanity that is on the line. And if we're not willing to adjust, moderate, and adapt, we're doomed. We're absolutely 100% doomed.
We leave you this Grammy Sunday with vocals from the White-Throated Bee Eaters at Kruger National Park in South Africa.
And while we're dooming ourselves, we're dooming nature of all sorts, regardless whether it flies in the sky, or it swims in the ocean, or it walks on land.
Collision of an Army Black Hawk and a passenger jet. Washington and the rest of the world are waking up to what feels like a new reality show as President Trump continues to make good on his campaign promises, despite the confusion and controversy surrounding some of them. We'll talk with the top Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee, Virginia's Mark Warner, Vermont Independent Bernie Sanders, and the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Republican Brian Mast. On the good news front, American Keith Siegel has a happy family reunion following his release from Hamas captivity. It's all just ahead on Face the Nation.
You could tell by the expression of that individual's face. He was grateful that all them women was doing what they was doing, but at the same time, he has went through something in his life that has been so dramatic. It's going to take him the rest of his life to get down on the same level of being able to respond with human affection the same way. Whenever a person has went through something like that, you talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, it can be so psychologically, mentally draining upon to that individual's life that some people don't never get over events like that. Just like the man that just got through losing his whole chicken farm. Some people don't never get over stuff like that. Just like the people in East Tennessee and Western North Carolina that lost everything. Everything. Or the people out in California that lost everything. And I could go down a long list of all these events that continue to keep happening again and again and again all over the planet. People don't get over that. It puts them into a state of mind to the point that it's basically taking all the wind out of their sail, and they don't feel like that there's no need to fight the good fight. There's no need to try to stay alive. There's no need to fight for humanity. That's all the defeat of the works of Satan, out to kill, steal, and destroy. These are not entities that are coming from the Holy Father. These are entities coming from evil. Evil can come in 1,000 million different ways, and it can affect people in billions of ways. And that's what we're seeing today on levels like I never would have thought would have occurred. But it all goes back to the core of origin in 1988 in the Reagan and the Bush's administration, that as of right now, the true Christians that do care about not only their own personal souls, but care about the rest of the world's souls, care about the rest of their brothers and sisters in Christ, are seeing these events escalating and getting worse. And if the truth be known, we should have all already been taken out of all this mess down here. But because of these delay tactics that I continue to keep telling people about, and people can snigger, you know, I can meet people down here in a restaurant. I went to the restaurant the other day for the first time over here in Sharon. I had been in there for years to actually sit down and eat, because I had an event that happened in there pertaining to somebody that I grew up with in this area, and since then I never decided to go back. But I could tell that certain people seeing me, they recognized me, they know who I was. I mean, whenever you live in a small town, a small community, a small rural area like this, people don't know who you are. They're going to recognize your automobiles. They're going to see what you do and what you don't do. But I could also see where they were sniggering and laughing. They wasn't necessarily doing it to my face, but I could tell that they was whispering and talking. Now, this is a gift that I have required from God, to be able to recognize these things, which in some ways it could actually be looked upon or dissected into the degree of being a curse, because I am so aware of how people feel around me and how they think. It's not even funny. But I've got to avoid those feelings. I've got to avoid those thoughts and say, regardless of what, I'm going to be like Christ. I'm going to maintain that Christ love, and I'm going to show pity and mercy upon these people the best way I know how. And I would have already done packed up and left if I was not a merciful person, and if I did not have mercy upon to the people in this area. The stuff that I had went through, by and large, most normal people would have done what various people wanted us to do, which was take our little tails and tuck it between our little legs and cry and run like a scalded dog. That's exactly what certain people wanted the Jacksons to do down here. Why? Because my whole family had been marginalized. Why? Why had my family been marginalized? Why does people hate me that don't even know me, that don't even recognize me down on aisle 5 walking and getting too close to somebody? Because their aurora, their spirit does not cling or confide with my spirit. I don't have to say a word to them. If you're a true Holy Ghost anointed person and you have the power of God within you, you can recognize in the spirit world how much different that now you're being treated and stereotyped in comparison to the way that you was not whenever you was out in the world. Whenever you was out in the world, you had all kind of friends. But it wasn't true friends. It wasn't true love. It was phony love. It was make-believe love. It was a wicked form of love. That's the difference between the agape love and the make-believe artificial love. Kind of like artificial sweetener, kind of like generic parts, kind of like aftermarket medicines. These are all stimulants that has come into society in the past 40, 50 years in my lifetime that did not exist up until then. But now we're having to deal with this stuff on a day-to-day level that obviously the people still hadn't awakened to. And until they do, you can count on it. It's coming near a neighborhood near you towards seeing more grief and more despair. And it just depends on where you are, what continent that you're on, regarding what type of remorse that you're going to be going through. This is the reason why Christ said, pray, pray, pray. Whenever you're in this state, whenever you're in this era, pray, pray. First prayer is to pray the prayer that Jesus told us to pray to the Father. Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. But the second prayer that Christ told us to pray was to pray that you're either worthy to escape these things that are going to be falling upon to the earth, or pray that you can endure them, indicating that they will be falling upon to the earth because of the wickedness of mankind. Please watch this. Please watch this particular program that I'm putting out, because it's become that much more evident towards this attack that we're under, this invasion that the planet is under right now.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. One of the president's biggest campaign promises was to enact steep tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China. Saturday night, he did just that, and the move has already sparked international backlash and sent chills through the financial world. We begin with senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe, who is traveling with Secretary of State Marco Rubio in Panama. Ed?
Margaret, good morning. These are sweeping tariffs. The president using a 1977 law to suggest there is now an extraordinary threat from fentanyl and illegal immigration, and that all three countries are failing to address those challenges. So, starting Tuesday, there will be 25% tariffs on all Mexican exports, 25% tariffs on most Canadian exports, 10% tariffs on Canadian energy exports, and 10% tariffs on all goods from China. This morning, the president acknowledged this could lead to higher prices, writing, "Will there be some pain? Yes, maybe, and maybe not," he wrote on his social media platform, "but we will make America great again, and it will all be worth the price that must be paid."
This has triggered a trade war. Canada's Prime Minister announced tariffs on American beer, bourbon, wine, lumber, fruits, clothing, appliances. So, Ed, what else should we expect is coming that could hurt American consumers?
Well, we should anticipate there could be a tit for tat here, because the orders that the president signed Saturday night give him the authority to keep raising tariffs on the three countries if they respond in kind, and that could contribute to an uptick in inflation, which we've seen in recent weeks. Now, the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau spoke directly to Americans last night, warning the tariffs, quote, "will put your jobs at risk, potentially shutting down American auto assembly plants and other manufacturing facilities." And he said Canada's planned dollar-for-dollar retaliatory tariffs will raise American grocery and gas prices. And while President Trump accused Mexico of having an alliance with drug cartels, President Claudia Sheinbaum said if such alliances exist anywhere, they exist in the U.S. gun shops that sell high-powered weapons to criminal groups. And China says it firmly deplores and opposes this move and will take necessary countermeasures to defend its legitimate rights and interests. It is planning to protest these tariffs to the World Trade Organization.
Now I hope that people understand the reason why Dennis James Jackson at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255, chose not to participate in this particular president election. I know that things have gotten way out of hand, to the degree that, first of all, you could have put both parties in power at the same time and there still wasn't going to be able to solve this problem pertaining to waving a magic wand over this stuff and it just suddenly going away. Number two, I knew that it was so far out of hand, the only way to straighten it out would be for something dramatic, something such as we have never seen before. And the approach that Donald Trump is approaching is going to have a backfiring effect upon to the American people, and that's what the professional society right now is talking about, that instead of helping society, it's actually going to hurt society. So was the analogy that Dennis James Jackson talked about pertaining to rebooting, kind of like the little farmer that planted the crop and only about half of it come up, towards replanting the crop back over again, towards defaulting and starting all over again, pertaining to this craziness that the American people and the rest of the world is going through?
To Central America and the Caribbean, to reiterate President Trump's concern.
I would say yes. That is the only way. By using artificial social technology.
We go now to Virginia Democratic Senator Mark Warner. He is the vice chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee and joins us from Palm Beach, Florida. Good morning to you, Senator.
Good morning, Margaret.
Do you have any sense yet what the cost of these tariffs could be for Virginia, which does have a wine industry, for example?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Margaret, I think we might want to call this the Donald Trump Super Bowl tax, with the big game coming next week. If you know, avocados, tomatoes, beer from Mexico, price is going to go up. The question around cars, I've read already about $3,000 of additional price on cars, up to $10,000 on trucks, because we've actually integrated very well our auto production with Canada and Mexico. I think as well about the fact that, you know, for years we've been encouraging businesses to leave China and nearshore to a place like Mexico. Now that is going to end up costing consumers more. And for industries like ours, like the wine industry, where we are growing rapidly in Virginia, those folks are going to get socked as well. So this is, remember Donald Trump got hired trying to saying he was going to lower grocery prices.
Right.
2 weeks in, he's doing something that's going to do the absolute opposite.
Well, we will track the impact of this trade war. Senator, I want to switch topics. You are, as we said, the vice chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. We watched that hearing this week for Tulsi Gabbard. She had two particular exchanges with Republican senators, Todd Young and James Lankford, who pressed her to say that Edward Snowden was a traitor. Lankford said it was a softball, but listen to what happened.
Did he betray a duty? Did he betray the trust of the American people? Which is, according to Merriam-Webster, that's the definition of a traitor.
Edward Snowden broke the law, and he released this information in a way that he should not have. He also acknowledged and exposed information that was unconstitutional.
Was he a traitor at the time when he took America's secrets, released them in public, and then ran to China and became a Russian citizen?
Senator, I'm focused on the future and how we can prevent something like this from happening again.
You work closely with these senators. I know they're Republicans and you're from a different party, but when you speak to them privately, do you think they can get over that, her refusal to call him a traitor, and actually vote to confirm her or even move her out of committee?
Listen, Margaret, Edward Snowden released more information, probably did as much damage to our intelligence community as anyone in history. And the fact that Ms. Gabbard, who actually had legislation to pardon Edward Snowden, she called him a brave whistleblower, couldn't bring herself to call him a traitor, I think is disqualifying just on plain judgment. What signal, if she got in, would that send to the IC workers or contractors? Is she going to suddenly enforce the law if she called Snowden a brave whistleblower? Right. And what I'm particularly concerned about, Margaret, is our sharing of information with our allies. That's not written into law. That's based on trust. Right. Will they really trust to share their intelligence with us if she can't call out one of the worst traitors in recent American history as a traitor?
Do you think she can even make it out of committee and make it to a full vote on the floor of the Senate?
I know there are a number. Our committee is historically the most bipartisan. We check our partisan hats at the door. There is enormous MAGA pressure that, as we've seen, put on senators who are willing to stand up. We'll know this coming week. But it's not just Snowden. It was America's most powerful intelligence tool is a law called something we call Section 702. She left us totally confused on her views on that. And as well, her lack of judgment, whether it's going to visit Assad when he was head of Syria, whether it was taking trips paid for by sketchy groups, or echoing, Putin's comments that somehow NATO started the war in Ukraine. That is not the judgment of somebody that would run 18 intelligence agencies.
We will watch to see those Republican senators. I want to ask you as well about what's happening at the FBI and the Justice Department. President Trump, he campaigned on this promise to restructure the government. Seems like he's implementing that this week. So far, between the FBI and Justice Department, we've seen at least 20 terminations. Some are calling this a purge, but is it overstating it if we're seeing 20 people lose their jobs?
Well, if you are suddenly taking out the most experienced folks at Justice or at the FBI, how does that make us stronger? And what he's saying is every FBI agent that somehow touched the January 6th investigation, that was a comprehensive investigation. I've been told there were almost half of all the FBI agents at least had some involvement. Remember, this was a case that was taken up against these rioters all across the country. If you're suddenly going to get rid of all of those, that could be thousands.
Yeah.
What does that mean for our cybersecurity? What does it mean for our trafficking and stop against fentanyl and other drugs? What does it mean in terms of, serious crime investigations? This would be devastating.
Well, our reporting is that the order was for a list to be drawn up of those 1,500 or so people who worked on those cases. We're going to try to get to the bottom of whether they're actually going to be fired or not. That's not clear.
We've seen you get your name on these lists. It's like Trump's potentially illegal offer to buy out all the federal employees, where we have no money in the budget for. But we had a great tragedy this week in D.C. with the crash.
Yeah.
We are already short air traffic controllers. If suddenly 2,000 or 3,000 air traffic controllers were to say, "Hey, I'm going to take this buyout," our airspace couldn't operate. And yet he's doing this so recklessly.
Is it being offered to them?
Without legal authority. Pardon me?
Is that open to, is it being offered to air traffic controllers?
All federal employees, my understanding went out to 2 million federal employees. This offer, which again, OPM does not have that authority to start with. That was who it came from.
Right.
But it is, I can tell you, with lots of federal employees, we got chaos on steroids going on. And we had heard from Trump's supporters, the OMB director, for example, that he wanted to traumatize federal workers. Well, that is happening. And these workers are the folks that inspect our fruit, our milk, our eggs. What happens if they all quit?
I want to ask you, and I know many of those people live in the state of Virginia. They are your constituents. I want to ask you about your former partner on the Intelligence Committee, Marco Rubio, now Secretary of State. He told a podcaster this week the president made the decision to cancel security protection for Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who served during the first term, because he looked through a threat versus cost risk assessment. I know you're briefed on intelligence. Did the threat from Iran to assassinate former U.S. officials go away?
No. I've seen no intelligence that would indicate that threat has been diminished.
But
I think
Secretary Rubio endorsed
it's not
this.
just Pompeo. Listen, I have not seen any intelligence, and here I agree with my partner Tom Cotton, the now chair of the Intel Committee. We've seen nothing to indicate less threat. And also taking out, for example, down the security detail for former General Chief of Staff Mark Milley. This is all about retribution. And he's putting people's lives in danger, which is just unbelievable. And I wish more people would stand up.
Senator, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Margaret.
Face the Nation will be back in a minute. Stay with us.
This could very well be one of the most importantest video links that I've recorded in quite some times pertaining to all this, from A to Z. And I just pray to God that God Almighty will be merciful unto us, because just the very presence of these ideals going out there to the world could actually cause a panic in people running to the grocery stores hoarding food that can afford to buy up extra food, that has adequate space in being able to store adequate food. But how about all the people that can't do that? Do you see the chaoticness that this is leaning towards pertaining to all this? I mean, there's no doubt we need to be aware of these viruses. We need to be aware of these diseases. We need to be aware of what's going on. But we also need to know why it's going on. How come it's so much of it that's happening now all over the planet? That's the part that the Homo sapiens down here is missing. They're not hitting the target pertaining to the professionalism.
Good morning.
I want to start first on the tariffs that were announced overnight by President Trump. You know there is a free trade agreement with Mexico and Canada. President Trump negotiated during his first term. The tariffs may violate that deal. If he's invoking tariffs on a national security basis, can you explain the threat posed by Canada?
Yeah, and he was President Trump, that is to say, was very specific in his executive order outlined that it's specifically related to fentanyl, it's specifically related to human trafficking, and there's a trust but verify situation that has to go on here. Through Canada as well, absolutely. Fentanyl through Canada, human trafficking through Canada, also with China in that mix for fentanyl as well. That was specifically outlined in it. And until that comes to an end, this is what's going to be on the table. And bear in mind as well that USMCA reauthorization is coming up in the coming up months and years.
So you don't believe that this violates the trade agreement? The treaty.
The violation has been to the United States of America. It's been to our sovereignty. It's been
right,
to
but
our
Congress
people.
votes on these things. So.
And I will make sure, certainly as the Foreign Affairs Chairman, that we give every single authority as we go through State Department reauthorization to make sure that this moves forward, as well as purging of people throughout the State Department, other agencies, where we're freezing aid. These are all very important and necessary steps to make sure that we secure America, and we're going to support that.
I'm sorry, can I follow up on what you just said there? You want to authorize purging of State Department personnel? What does that mean exactly?
Well, if you want to take a look at the State Department, where DEI has been a priority over, let's say, diplomacy in many accounts, I can give you hundreds of examples of where they were authorizing.
What proof do you have of that?
Sure, let's list them off. $500,000 to expand atheism in Nepal, $50,000 to do, let's see, a transgender opera in Colombia, $47,000 to do an LGBTQ trans comic book in Peru, $20,000 a pop to do drag shows in Ecuador. Shall I continue with more examples of where DEI was the priority?
It certainly seems like there could be a review of things. Foreign aid, as you know, is less than 1% of the entire federal budget. So we're talking small amounts of money by comparison.
We're still talking about tens and tens of billions of dollars. And if you want to go to somebody else on the other side of the aisle, Samantha Powers, she had a worthy goal, although it was a stupid goal. She said she was hoping to get the amount of foreign aid, U.S. aid dollars that go to actual aid, up to 30 cents on the dollar from 10 cents on the dollar. That's a major problem, that we have this agency that's all that goes abroad.
I think you're talking
the American workers' dollar.
I think now you're talking about the USAID, the aid agency, which is a separate from the State Department currently and has about $40 billion worth.
Likely going to be rolled more closely under Secretary.
Yeah, tell me about that, because that's where I was going. Has the Trump administration informed you of plans to dismantle or significantly shrink this agency?
This is something that I'm working on very specifically in conjunction with Secretary Rubio to make sure that there's the appropriate command and control of these agencies, where, again, to make that same point, right now,
they already
maybe
report to Secretary of State.
But 10 to 30 cents on the dollar is what actually goes to aid. So there's not the right amount of command and control that's going on with the way that it's set up currently.
Congress authorizes and earmarks funding.
Most of these dollars that go out of USAID, 70+%, don't come from U.S. growers, U.S. farmers, U.S. ranchers, or go through U.S. ports, and that's another big problem for America.
So, I'm sorry, Congress already authorizes and earmarks the funding. Just to be very clear, you're not endorsing getting rid of USAID as a separate department, which already reports to the Secretary of State, are you?
I would be absolutely for, if that's the path we go down, removing USAID as a separate department and having it fall under one or the other parts of United States Department of State because of its failure. I just went over the numbers twice with you in the amount of aid that actually makes it into the hands. I mean, you could almost say this is a little bit hyperbole, but there's probably more dollars that go towards state dinners around the DC Beltway than what actually goes into rice and beans abroad. That's the state of what's going on with USAID. And Samantha Powers said no less herself.
Well, I think every single administration authorizes reviews, could increase efficiencies. There are plenty of people who propose bringing it more under the authority of the State Department. Madeleine Albright tried to do that. That's not a new MAGA idea. I think the question here, though, is about how you do it. Do you still believe that in the law signed in the 1960s that Congress has to sign off on any changes to USAID, or do you think President Trump can just make all of this happen through executive order?
So all of those examples that you just gave of those historical figures, the difference is Now the job is going to get done. It's going to be 99.99% of cents on the dollar actually go towards what it's intended.
Okay, so you're talking about
around the Beltway.
You're
That's
talking
what's
about
going to happen. That's the change.
Efficiencies in aid versus restructuring. So let me ask you about that. Like I said,
that requires restructuring, 100%. You can't create that efficiency just by wishing it into existence. You have to restructure where the failures are and put the right things in place.
Of course. But what we're hearing from many of these aid organizations and officials is that can you restructure after you finish the review and not freeze funding now immediately? I spoke to former USAID Global Health Head Atul Gawande yesterday. He told me this isn't a pause in foreign aid, it is a demolition of USAID. As he put it, you can't pause a flight in midair. That's what's happening. This immediate freeze in funding is stopping agencies in the field from being able to do the work they do.
Let's say why that is so important. And let's talk about the real facts on the ground. The Trump administration comes in, or representatives like myself that do oversight, the agencies will literally not tell us what they are writing grants for, literally. Or they will lie about it, or they will tell the new political appointees under the Trump administration, I'm just not going to tell you that. Those are real things that have happened. So the way that you make them come and answer for where they are actually sending dollars is to say, we're freezing that, we're putting it on hold. You need to come to us and explain what it is you're doing, why you're doing it, and where it's actually saving life. And guess what? When they don't come explain something, that also begs the question, why were they doing it in the first place?
But the way these things work is
Exactly.
that contractors have to front the
he's right
cash
about
and go
that
to the
in
U.S.
a way.
government for reimbursement. So when you put in an immediate freeze, that means drugs don't get delivered. That means they don't get distributed. That means bomb disposal units don't get to go out there in places like Cambodia and remove ordnance or provide help to people who receive it. That's the pushback from aid organizations who are saying they're going to have to carry out layoffs in the thousands in the coming week. Does that concern you at all?
They will have an opportunity. It doesn't concern me because of the grift that has been going on to the American taxpayer, the American worker. That's what needs to be answered for. And so you look at this. Let's use PEPFAR as an example. You were talking about drugs going to individuals. There was a release of that hold that was authorized, but it shouldn't be the case that the American people fund HIV and AIDS drugs for 20 million people across Africa, where many of these countries are working very directly with our adversaries like China. That is an example of them taking us for granted. We need to be asking the question, should they be weaning off of this? Should we be paying it for these very expensive HIV and AIDS drugs? Should the American worker be footing the bill for that? Those are real questions.
Yeah, real questions, but in the meantime, people need their drugs while you ask those questions. So that's where the disagreement is with the aid organizations. But let me ask you about air traffic controllers and what's happening
Not with
here.
all the leaders of other countries, though. I believe I saw the leader of Kenya as one step up and say, hey, this is an example where we need to step up for ourselves and show how we can take care of ourselves. And I believe that was the president there.
I want to ask you, as I was saying, about another committee you sit on, Transportation Committee. The FAA hiring policy for air traffic controllers, including under the first Trump administration, offered equal opportunity to those with targeted disabilities, including, as the president read, hearing, vision, missing extremities, partial paralysis, complete paralysis, severe intellectual disability. The president singled this out, this policy, as a contributor possibly to the crash. Do you agree with the diversity policy, or do you agree with the president? I know you lost 2 limbs serving this country in Afghanistan. Do you hear those words and take offense to them? Or
no offense. Let's unpack it. Number one, I'll use myself as an example, right? There are things that I am suited to do, no doubt, but flying an aircraft, to stick with the subject at hand, would not be one of them. I could fly a personal aircraft, but to put me in charge
air
of
traffic
50
controller.
or 150 lives, that would not be the right case for me personally, given my physical disabilities and foot pedals on an aircraft. To go to the diversity side of it and the actual crash, yes, there were very real errors that took place, both in the air traffic control tower and with the helicopter pilots, it seems. But more systemically, is there a big hiring problem across all federal agencies, to include the FAA, where they made the priority diversity and inclusion instead of excellence and performance? Yes, that's the case. They made the priority appearance and lifestyle and not the big deal.
Congressman, thank you for your time today. We'll be right back with a lot more Face the Nation. Stay with us.
Chaotic. It's kind of like, reminds me of the gold rush, or whenever the 1929 deal happened, whenever everybody was rushing towards getting the money out of the
Quickly,
bank.
do you have a sense of the impact of these tariffs on your state?
Well, it's going to be very severe, but this is not the only thing that worries me. Margaret, we are living in an unprecedented moment in American history. We're looking at a rapid growth of oligarchy. We're looking at a rapid growth of authoritarianism, and I fear that we're looking at a rapid growth of kleptocracy as well. And I'm going to do everything I can to work with my supporters all over this country to stand up and fight back, to make sure we have an economy that works for everybody, not just Elon Musk, and that we maintain American democracy. Difficult times.
Senator, I'm going to have to ask you more about what you mean by that on the other side of this commercial break, because I have to take it. Stay with us. We hope all of you will as well.
She seems to be upset. I ain't never seen her like that.
Welcome back to Face the Nation. We return to our conversation with Vermont Independent Senator Bernie Sanders. Senator, thank you for sticking with us through the break. I want to ask you about some of the rather fiery hearings you were a part of this past week, in particular with the potential Health and Human Services Secretary to be RFK Jr. You told CBS in December you think he's right about the food industry and obesity, and what he says about high prices for prescription drugs. But during the hearing, you had some sharp exchanges. Are you, at this point, decided on your vote? Will you cross over and help Republicans confirm him?
Margaret, I have up to now voted for some Trump appointees, a few. I voted against most, and I'll make my decisions next week. Where Kennedy is right is we are an unhealthy society, a point I've been making, many others have been making for a long time. One of the things that concerns me very much, and Kennedy mentioned it, is our life expectancy. How long our people live is 5 years less than other wealthy countries. And if you're working class in this country, you live 6 or 7 years lower than if you are rich. It is an issue we have to deal with. And I think the kind of addictive and poisonous food that the food industry is providing our kids is one of the factors, not many. But when you have Kennedy come forward and saying he believes, continues to believe, that autism is caused by vaccines, despite the fact that there have been a dozen studies over the years which disprove that, when he has other conspiracy theories, when he cannot acknowledge that if you're going to make America healthy, you got to guarantee health care to all people. He was not clear about the need to take on the greed of the pharmaceutical industry and lower prescription drug costs. So I was not particularly happy with his presentation.
On the autism point, there is no established cause of autism spectrum disorder, but 1 in 36 children have been identified with it, according to the CDC. There is concern in this space, including from your Republican colleague, Cassidy. He is a medical doctor. He said he's struggling with the nomination because he fears Kennedy may undermine faith in vaccines. Take a listen.
I recognize, man, if you come out unequivocally, vaccines are safe, it does not cause autism, that would have an incredible impact. That's your power. So what's it going to be? Will it be using the credibility to support lots of articles? Or will it be using credibility to undermine?
The senator seemed to be saying, if you want my vote, answer the question. You said you haven't decided on RFK and how you're going to vote. Is this a red line for you?
I don't want to. Margaret, what I'm saying is I just don't go around making these announcements. I will vote when I'll vote. But anybody who watched that hearing understands my deep concerns about Kennedy. But I got to tell you, the conspiracy theories that he is throwing out is not unlike what we're hearing all over the Trump administration. And to me, what is most important in terms of what's been happening since Trump has been president is not just him having the three wealthiest people in the country stand behind him.
Right.
And by the way, anybody, any working person in this country should understand what that means. It means that you can have a government working for the very rich, not for the working class of this country. But the movement toward authoritarianism. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I want to ask you about that, but just to push you.
Not necessarily. It could mean that Donald J. Trump was smart enough that he's got plan A, plan B, and maybe even plan C, because if you're going to be a good leader, you're only as good as the administration or the cabinet members that you have planted around you. Okay? And because of things being so erratically unbalanced on every level that you can think of, from condoms to healthcare to him offering these offers pertaining to possibly airplane craft safety issues. Maybe he's got those powerful people in place to go into a new system of the digital golden era. I'm just throwing this out there. I don't know. I know that whenever you bite off more than you can chew, because of various administrations that has led us down this path that we're on right now, it's going to take some harsh decisions, and it's probably going to take some very, very harsh implements towards people making sacrifices because of. The party's over. Giving away the giveaways is over. And if people hadn't come to that acknowledgement, then it's their own fault. But we are in a disastrous mode. And we have been in a disastrous mode for quite some time, because this is the consequences that you get whenever you continue to keep kicking the can down the road and you keep raising the debt ceiling, You cannot borrow your way out of debt. And so many hundreds of millions of people have been saying the very same thing. Probably ever since, I'm going to say, Bill Clinton's era. You cannot continue to keep kicking the can down the road. Donald Trump has decided to look at it and say, you know what? This needs to be cleaned up. We're gonna take out the trash. We're fixing to drain the swamp. Well, this is what it's going to take. And I hope people understand that and recognize that, the seriousness of all this, because the best that I can tell people is that you better have lots of bullets. You better be willing to tighten your belt pertaining to you not eating like you used to, and all the other things that you was accustomed to may very well disappear or get so hard to get, you'd have to be a very wealthy individual to get them. Regardless whether it's automobiles, regardless whether it's whatever. This has been brewing for quite some time. And now the American people, certain people, some of the people are beginning to address it and look at it and awaken to it. How much more serious is it than that? It's serious, and it's been serious, and it's been avoided, it's been neglected for all these years, and now it's caught up with us.
Point, because it's not just a matter of a vote. Like, what you are saying is that someone at the top of the health department who is rejecting science or rejecting data that says there's no linkage here, no proven linkage here, by not being clear and saying that's a red line, doesn't that lend itself to misinterpretation? Why won't you say that's disqualifying for him?
Because I have not said to anybody how I will vote. It doesn't matter. I will vote when I'll vote. But let me just
Okay, because Republicans were hoping you would help them. That's why I'm asking you.
Well, I know they hope for a lot of things. It just may not happen. But I think... All right,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Look, the bottom line is we have a healthcare crisis in America. We're the only major country not to guarantee healthcare to all people. We pay by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. Our life expectancy is shorter than other countries. Yes, we've got to deal with it in a very direct and forceful manner. You got to take on the insurance companies. You got to move to Medicare for all. Got to lower the cost of prescription drugs. We have to understand why our life expectancy is low. And by the way, it's not just healthcare.
Yeah.
It's the fact that so many of our working people are stressed out by inadequate incomes that's having an impact on not only their lifespans, but their well-being. Those are issues we've got to address.
During the campaign, then candidate Trump and Vance, they were very much championing working class people, as you have through the years. They said they support unions, they don't want to tax tips, they want child care tax credits, they're pro-worker. Do you see any opportunities to work with them on specific policies, and if so, where?
Well, if they were telling the truth and they will go forward in trying to stand up for the working class, of course I will work with them. But I got to tell you, just last week, what Trump did is essentially neuter the National Labor Relations Board. This is something that Bezos wanted. It's something that Elon Musk wanted. What that means, if you are a worker right now, and there are millions of workers who want to join a union because they know unions will give you better wages and better working conditions, better benefits. What they have done is neutered that. So right now, union-busting corporations like Amazon and others can do what they do against workers with impunity. That is not standing with workers. We need to raise the starvation minimum wage, which is now $7.25 an hour, to a living wage. I've not heard one word from the Trump administration about that.
Well, they want to leave that up to states and corporations as well to make a decision.
Yeah, that ain't going to do it.
Vice President Vance told us last Sunday, despite those big tech CEOs giving money to the inauguration for Donald Trump, he still believes they have too much power in big tech, and that he says, they're still very much on notice in regard to his past warnings they could be broken up. Is that a place you were also concerned and could work with him on?
Well, I think Lina Khan, the former head of the FTC, did a great job. And if Vance wants to work with us on that, he's right. You have right now not only more income and wealth inequality in this country than ever before, more concentration of ownership in the tech industry and in other industries. Do I think we should start breaking up some of these large corporations? Absolutely, I do, and we'd be happy to work with them if they're serious about that.
Senator Bernie Sanders, independent from Vermont, thank you for joining us. We'll be right back.
I think this is one of the most serious interviews that Miss Margaret has done in quite some times. These are very, very serious matters, and of course, if you go up into the beginning part of this video link, when we was talking about some of the other stuff on the other program, they're both in conjunction with one another, regardless whether it be airplanes falling out of the sky, or helicopters being too high, or eggs being too high, or chickens dying, or diseases, or health care, or all the above. These are awful serious matters that the people need to address immediately, and by making Canada mad at us, and by making Mexico mad at us, and by making China mad at us, basically making everybody else mad at us, I don't feel like is the appropriate way of doing this. That's just my opinion. Now, yes, does the border need to be re-examined pertaining to it being more stricter for anybody to come over here illegal, regardless whether it be the north border or the south border? Yes. Yes, absolutely. Did Donald Trump need to do a blanket pardon pertaining to the January 6th deal? Probably not. He probably should have put more thought into that, especially those that deliberately went in there, purposely want to commit crime and bring harm and hurt into people's lives. I've said that all along, that I did not agree with releasing those people out into society, knowing good and well that they was basically went in there to cause havoc, violence, plain barbaric violence. That shouldn't have been handled that way. But I want to say something else. Please bear with me just for 1 second. I shouldn't be having to make all these video links regarding these political affairs. I'm a man of God that's been called of God to bring forth a message of God. that really don't have nothing to do with the price of eggs in China or have the price of eggs over here in America. I'm supposed to relay a message coming out of the Bible to humanity of me being the messenger. They didn't want that. They didn't want it then. Obviously, they don't want it now. So because of it, it has led us where we are right now. Going all the way back to 1983, whenever I made mention that America needed to legalize marijuana on a federal scale, and because of it, I was demonized and dehumanized right here in Northwest Tennessee ever since I mentioned the fact. And I was talking about medical marijuana towards helping society, not just to do it leisurely or just randomly. I was talking about helping people that needed that type of help. Beginning in Kenton, Tennessee in 1983, 40 plus years ago. Not 30 plus years ago, but 40 plus years ago. Look at all the millions and millions of dollars that could have been, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars that could have been added to the problem pertaining to the deficit. And look at all the children's lives that's been affected in having that freelance marijuana stimulant out there that your 10, 12, 8-year-olds could get a hold of because it was handled on a black market the same as it was in the 1910s and the 1920s before the alcohol, whatever they call it, whenever they...
Also, here's CBS News.
Whenever they made it illegal to make alcohol, the prohibition, it should have been handled on the same level as far as legalizing it. That way it would have been handled with the professional people and not just having it on the black market. But did anybody listen to me? Nope. They wanted to demonize me because of it. Wow. Think of that, Northwest Tennessee.
Forced to resign, retire, or face termination. What does it mean to have those positions forced out?
Yeah, when you combine that essential layer of leadership, executive assistant directors control multiple operational divisions, so at least a half a dozen of those reportedly are gone. And then you get down to the level of at least 2 or 3 special agents in charge in the field, including Miami, Washington field office. You are starting to lose too much experience. And if this plays out next week, as reportedly it might, with regard to dismissing hundreds or thousands of special agents in the field who have touched January 6 cases or Trump-related cases, this makes America less safe. This is not reduction. This is not efficiency. It makes America less safe when you lose that much expertise this quickly.
Okay, just to follow up there, Scott MacFarlane, what Frank was referring to is the list that was requested. CBS's Rob Laguerre actually obtained the memo from Acting Deputy Attorney General Emil Bove, who was previously the personal attorney for Donald Trump. He ordered the acting director of the FBI to compile everyone who was an employee who was assigned to the 1,500 January 6 cases. There were also 8 executives pushed out. Is this a legal and lawful order? Are FBI officials going to actually fire the people on these lists?
The list is required and must be produced by 12 p.m. Eastern Time Tuesday, according to our latest reporting. Whether it is produced is a different question. But the bottom line here is that such a list, Margaret, would include FBI employees from every FBI field office across the country. This is not just a Washington investigation. The January 6 cases went nationwide. What's more, a lot of the names that are going to be on this list, according to my reporting, are already public domain. They're in the court filings. They're in the court docket. They're already out there. So it's going to be difficult to mask anybody's name or anybody's identity. Whether this is legally permissible, it's a different question. Whether these firings are legally permissible is a different question. We know the acting FBI director, in a memo sent to his employees, he emphasized that there are robust protections. His word is robust protections for FBI agents against employment actions. Feels to me like there is a galvanization of FBI employees if they want to fight this, to try to make some effort to push back. Whether they do so, it's a different question.
That's what I was asking. Is it actually going to be firings, or is this actually just going to be? You can't do what the president's team is pressing to do. Brian Fitzpatrick, you know him from covering The Hill. He's a Republican.
Oh, you
from
can do
Pennsylvania,
it.
used to
You
be
can
an
do it.
FBI agent. Gave CBS a statement. I want to read.
She misquoted herself. You can do it. But look at the consequences it's going to cause.
They're sent, the cases to which they're assigned, and the leads which they are asked to cover. Much like the military, they go where they are told and perform the investigative duties that their chain of command orders them to do.
That's right.
Frank, I know you know this, but that is a Republican explaining the basic function of how law enforcement works. It sounds like there's going to be pushback on the potential of these firings.
Yes, indeed. It's been reported by multiple media outlets that the acting director pushed back very hard and very loudly against the DOJ request. And reportedly, he may have been threatened with termination himself. Interestingly enough, both the acting director and acting assistant director would be on that list. They both worked Jan 6 related cases or Trump related cases. So we've got a potential standoff that's here. But yes, line agents did nothing outside of the law or attorney general guidelines. They simply worked criminal cases, in many cases gained convictions and guilty pleas. And if they were literally all to be pushed out the door, we would be talking about thousands of FBI agents. There's only 14,000 agents in the field, and we'd be talking close to 6,000 of them who worked such cases.
And Scott, we were just talking about Kash Patel, the boss, isn't in place yet. He was asked under oath before Congress if he knew of some of these actions that were underway, literally as he was testifying. He said he didn't know anything about the firings. Is it credible, and is it going to be a problem for his confirmation?
This might have been simultaneous, Margaret. These questions, including from Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, were happening as a lot of this communication was going back and forth over terminations, resignations, retirements. Kash Patel has been on a trajectory towards confirmation as the next FBI director almost from the jump. The one vote I've been watching closely, Tom Tillis, the North Carolina Republican, up for re-election in 2026. He introduced Kash Patel and validated him. It seems nobody has jumped up this weekend to say, I'm now opposed.
Scott MacFarlane, it's going to be another interesting week in Washington. Thank you for bottom lining it. We'll be right back.
What happens when the world's best journalists come together?
That's one of the problems, is that the journalist has got together on all this. They was in behind the ordeal that went on in 1988 towards basically shutting the mouths of those that shouldn't have been shut. It was the media that's now been using politics as a feeding frenzy every time there's a major election. And really and truly, the free press is part of the very problem that has put us where we are right now. Some of those things need to be evaluated, because I've had problems with FBI, either up in Kentucky or over in Oklahoma or right here in Tennessee, pertaining to them basically targeting me, as Donald Trump said, a witch hunt. But this is what happens.
Support system from the good.
This is what occurs whenever you try to cheat, lie, or manipulate something that you shouldn't have cheated or lied or manipulated on, which is the American people, we the people. And now it's going to be we the people that's going to pay the consequences on account of it. It's sad. It is a horrible, horrible travesty.
Days. How is your uncle doing?
First, thank you for having me. I've been dreaming about being here today. He's doing okay. He's lost some weight. He's pale, but he's strong, and he's doing okay somehow. We're incredibly grateful.
I mean, we've seen the video and the images of him being reunited with family members. Will your father, his brother, see him soon?
Yes, he's on his way. We've been staggering the family visits so as not to overwhelm him. But yes, we are all going to see him. And actually, his youngest daughter, Sheer, got engaged a month before October 7th. And so the wedding planning began and then abruptly came to a stop as both of her parents, Keith and my Aunt Aviva, who was released in the November 2023 deal, were taken hostage. So what we've talked about is that, someday we're all going to get together and throw an absolutely epic wedding. And that's what we're looking forward to now.
So you've been an advocate for the family here in Washington, both with the Biden and the Trump administrations. In your view, do you think this deal, this hostage release, would have happened without American pressure?
No, definitely not. And I do want to say, so the Biden team, Jake Sullivan, Brett McGurk, President Biden, Secretary Blinken, Bill Burns, they were so tireless in their commitment to get this deal done. But the really amazing thing is that the minute that President Trump was elected, his team started working hand in glove with the Biden administration. We felt no break in the commitment to get Keith home. Steve Witkoff and Adam Bowler, along with President Trump, started working hand in hand with the Biden team. And I don't know what other issue you can say that about with these administrations. The Trump team really did push it over the finish line. And we're incredibly grateful to all of them for the work that they did. I also just want to say the Qatari negotiators, mediators who were part of the November 2023 deal were also instrumental. And then what I've learned in this completely bizarre experience is that there is a whole industry of people, NGOs, who work on hostage negotiations on behalf of families. We worked with Global Reach, Mickey Bergman, Stacia George, and Eric Lebson. They're a nonprofit. We would not have gotten Keith home without them. So it was just a tremendous group effort across the board, across political lines, and that's heartening.
You told us back in April on this program that you were worried, quote, it's not arguably in Prime Minister Netanyahu's political interest to close a deal, and you were worried he was going to sink it. He's announced phase 2 of the hostage framework begins getting negotiated tomorrow, Monday. Do you think he's incentivized now to actually see this deal through?
I think that the Trump team has done a really tremendous job of putting serious pressure on him, and that is making a difference. I think that we're ecstatic that Keith is home, but it took almost 500 days. And that is in part because of Netanyahu. This deal was available for months. The Biden team was working on it, and he wouldn't come to the table often. I mean, this is such a complicated issue, but I am worried. I think this is a really fragile deal, as we all understand. And so, I have a lot of faith in the Trump team and in all of the people working on this to put serious pressure on him to see it through. I think what we've seen is that diplomacy and political agreement is the only way to get all of the hostages home. And, we're one of the lucky ones, but there remain 5 American citizens and dozens of other hostages who still need to come home.
And the remains of some of those Americans wouldn't come through until phase 3 and phase 2. We know Idan Alexander, a uniformed IDF soldier who was a U.S. citizen.
Yes.
The deal would have to continue to work to actually bring him home. Sagi Chen, we're waiting on him to be released as well.
Exactly.
So I emphasize that because when we talk about deals and diplomacy, these are lives at risk. And if the deal doesn't continue to stay in place, they may be.
And these are Americans.
Yeah.
These are Americans who need to come home.
Hannah, thank you.
Thank you so much,
And
Margaret.
congratulations.
Thank you.
It's great news.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be right back.
Bonds of effect.
Back up. Back up. Back up. Back up. Back up. Right there.
Call now. Before we go, CBS Evening News co-anchor and presidential historian John Dickerson has some thoughts on the tone of those Oval Office moments following tragedy.
After the deadliest air crash in 20 years in America, President Trump responded as presidents have before.
I speak to you this morning in an hour of anguish for a nation. In moments like this, the differences between Americans fade to nothing compared to the bonds of affection and loyalty that unite us all
Differences fade because we are all reminded of the basic truth that we are all human and life is fragile. In such rare moments, a president can transform private grief into public meaning. These presidential moments live in our collective memory. Ronald Reagan addressing the nation after the Challenger disaster.
We will never forget them, nor the last time we saw them, this morning, as they prepared for their journey and waved goodbye, and slipped the surly bonds of earth to touch the face of God.
George W. Bush at Ground Zero.
The nation sends its love and compassion.
Barack Obama singing at the Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston. In speech, by bullhorn, in song, and now by executive memorandum. That's how Donald Trump used the Oval Office where Reagan had eulogized the Challenger astronauts. Though the president had earlier declared an hour of anguish for our nation, for him, the hour only lasted a few minutes. He spent much of the remainder of this unique moment distributing blame.
I put safety first. Obama, Biden, and the Democrats put policy first. And they put politics at a level that nobody's ever seen.
The starkest claim, the one behind the Oval Office signing ceremony, that diversity programs had caused the crash that killed 67.
We have a presidential memorandum titled Immediate Assessment of Aviation Safety. In light of the damage done to aviation safety by the Biden administration's DEI and woke policies.
When asked what proof he had that diversity was the culprit, the president said he had no proof but didn't need any.
I'm trying to figure out how you can come to the conclusion right now that diversity had something to do with this crash.
Because I have common sense, okay? And unfortunately, a lot of people don't.
The president's certainty about the crash, despite the lack of proof, suggested for many Americans that the common sense he was referring to was that diversity means things automatically go wrong when people of color are in charge. In one press conference, he traveled the entire length of the emotional register, from asserting that the differences between Americans fade, to returning the focus to those differences.
That's it for us today. Thank you for watching. Until next week. For Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.
I got something I would like to weigh in on regarding what they're talking about here.
There, Benfica has plans to build a state-of-the-art academy camp.
That I would appreciate to be able to weigh in on some of this. I think what I'm looking at, the people by and large here in the United States have been calloused so much in people kicking the can down the road, and it didn't matter if it was pertaining to gun violence, it didn't matter if it was pertaining to working with the national debt, it didn't matter what it was on. Everybody wants to keep pushing it off to the side, out of sight, out of mind, out of sight, out of mind. That works temporarily, out of sight, out of mind. But eventually that will catch up with society. As I said a while ago, we are in basically a distressful mode right now that is obvious to a lot of people is bad. Matter of fact, I just got through talking to a couple last night in Milan, Tennessee, that I used to live beside, David Mayo and his wife, and I didn't realize how extensive that the problem was with the military, pertaining whenever COVID first come into play, of how many military men and women lost their careers over not wanting to be vaccinated, that basically got kicked down the road. I can also see, or we can see, where Donald Trump is stepping in towards wanting to be the ramrod, wanting to be the fixer. And this is something that we should have had even before the Clinton administration, and we're just now getting it towards being factual and being this transparent to the world regarding the problems that we're staring at. But I think this is my gut feeling about Donald Trump. I think in some ways he knows that we are in the center of the storm. He knows that we are on a boat that's sinking. And let's say that we're on a vessel that's sinking that's got, let's just round it out to a round number, 100 different little holes all over the boat. And though the leaks are small, little, tiny little leaks, you got 100 of them all over the bottom of the boat. So we're steadily going down. Donald Trump is trying to plug up some of them leaks. He's trying to stop those leaks because he realizes, hey, this thing's on the way out. We're fixing to swamp the boat here if we don't fix these leaks. You cannot fix the little leaks by creating bigger leaks. Because I promise you, if you create enough bigger leaks, it won't take but just 4 or 5 bigger holes compared to the little bitty holes to go ahead and sink the boat. That's what I pray to God that won't happen. And I pray to God that we have good enough, intelligent, smart enough people to sit down, especially dealing with these different countries, that could actually formulate a rebellion, and in the rebellion would actually hurt the American people more than helping the American people. Once more, I should not be having to make these videos like this. I'm not a politician. I ain't running for office. This isn't my job. This isn't my calling. My calling is to distribute the message coming from the Bible. But nobody wanted to support that. Nobody wanted to support the man that was called of God in supporting the Windmill Ministries missions. So did I fail the ministry? Or did the people around me that didn't pay any attention to the things that I was teaching and preaching, did they fail the messenger that was giving forth the message? I realize that you didn't like the message. You know, whenever I get to looking at it from a carnal perspective, at the book of Revelations, along with Daniel, and some of the other things that Christ taught us to be aware of, I don't like them. I would be a fool to like them in a physical, fleshly form. But on a spiritual aspect of it, Lord Jesus, come quickly, is my prayer, that if the truth be known, those that is already perished before us, regardless of what form or fashion, they're the ones that's going to be in a lot better shape than what we are. And that's one of the reasons why I believe that Jesus Christ, after he went up into the mountain and said, Jerusalem, I've gathered you together, you wouldn't listen, as a hen would gather chicks. And that was one of the primary reasons why Christ said, weep not for me. Weep not for me, but weep for yourselves and your children and your children's children and all of those who are going to be affected by this. Because for every action, there will be a reaction. And we're now starting to see the consequences in the action that took place either in 1983 with Ronald Reagan, or the action that took place with Ronald Reagan in 1988. We're beginning to see the action of the reaction of the consequences that now is falling upon to not just the feet of the guilty, but now it's falling on the feet of the innocent, which makes it a travesty. Unless this is handled in a very, very cautious, prestigious way, kind of like a doctor going in and working his way around a certain organ and making sure that he cuts the cancer completely out of there as he's working. Unless you use a very, very sharp instrument, all them little holes are going to turn into big holes. And whenever those big holes come about, you can bet your bottom dollar we're heading down. We're heading down. And I feel like that this could all be not only averted, pertaining to it being avoided, but I feel like that it could be handled in a proper form, regardless whether it be Canada, Mexico, South America, all them other countries down in there, Brazil, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Russia, China, India, Africa, or any of the above, I feel like that this could be handled in a much more profound, professional way, rather than you taking a little problem and creating a big problem. Once more, by doing that, you actually become part of the problem rather than the solution to it. I can't say anything any more drastic than what I'm saying right now in making these video links in the name of the Windmill Ministries missions here at 291 Thompson Road, Chevron, Tennessee, zip code 38255. I cannot be more specific about the looming doom that not only shadows over the American people, but the looming doom that could be shadowing over the whole planet. Which leads me to one final thought. And you can take this for what it's worth. I've read the Bible several times. Matter of fact, the Bible's really the only book that I've actually read from front to back. Whenever it comes to me being a study genius, or me making straight A's or B's or C's or even D's, I didn't do that. I had to forsake education because of the environment that I was going through pertaining to our father that had war scars, post-traumatic stress disorder of the abuses that was going on, and I got to the point that I wouldn't even take my report card home every 30 days to have my parents sign it. I'd have somebody else sign it. You would have thought that they would have figured out what was going on, but they never questioned me about it. But the teachers that kept basically letting me sleep in class rather than do my homework and just kept giving me D's, we'll push him up to the next class, push him up to the next class. You would have thought somebody in the school administration would have stopped that too at that time in Sharon, Weakley County, Tennessee, but they didn't. So that's all spilt milk. That's all happened in the past, right? That's all over with. Can't change what's already occurred. Can't put the toothpaste back into the toothpaste bottle, right? Kind of like taking the genie in the bottle and putting the genie back into the bottle. Once the genie gets out, he's out. This is my question, because I've heard different theologians and preachers teach about it pertaining to what it talks about, that there will be a city that could actually be symbolic of a nation where at last, for she had great wealth, apparel, and basically corrupted the world with her thoughts and with her ideology, that in an hour, destruction had been brought upon to her. And I'm talking about a specific prophecy out of Revelations, that I pray to God that that not be us. But it could very well be in the trajectory that we are heading in right now. And friends, if that don't get your attention, there's no Cuban crisis, there's no other event, regardless, out of all the wars that America's ever been engaged in. If that don't get your attention, I don't know nothing else that will. Which leads me to believe that maybe we are doomed. I pray to God that we're not. I hope and pray for not just my sake, but for everybody else's, including my son and my granddaughter, and possibly even have great-grandchildren after her. Like I said, I sat with a couple last night, and I spoke to them very elegantly about the past and about the future, and we both come up with the same conclusion, that yes, Donald Trump, his intent's there, but is it the wrong intent? Is he approaching this situation towards actually becoming a bigger problem rather than a solution to it? I'm going to let you make your mind up about that in the next 30 days, or actually the next 2 weeks, in which way you think this is going to fall, especially whenever you start hearing presidents from other countries, whenever you start hearing leaders from other countries telling you okay, if you're going to do this, we're going to do that. And then if you get to stepping it out towards the sacrifices that's going to be made in exchange to that, there has to be another solution. Just like I have made the offer of having a solution to the Pakistani Jewish problem in either being a one government state or a two state solution, of Satan in the flesh over in Saudi Arabia, which don't care about his own people, much less anybody else in the world, that if he had any, what you would call morale, or if he had any type of empathy for the rest of the world, he would agree to this challenge that if I kill him, we'll go to a one-state solution, and if I kill him, it will be a two-state solution. I don't know if that's still going into the ears of the deaf or the eyes of the demented. I don't know. I know that whenever you get to looking at the characteristics coming from the spiritual Satan, the actual Luciferian Lucifer, that's out to kill, steal, and destroy. That is the author of confusion. That was a murderer and a liar from the beginning. It is the very one that has put us where we are right now. But what engaged this, along with COVID, put your thinking caps on for a second, was not only was we going through a horrifying moment in life that other generations before us has went through pertaining to pandemics, but it is what the oil industry done that added insult to misery whenever they decided that they was going to raise the prices up to God knows what. Where do you think that was being generated from? OPEC. The Saudis. That's where that was coming from. They have upset the apple cart, not just in America, but throughout all these other countries. And some of these other little countries are actually in a peril right now because of that. Because they didn't have the funds. They didn't have the backing. They didn't have the knowledge. They didn't have the resources like America did. So if America is in the shape that America's in right now, can you only imagine what's happening in El Salvador or Belize or some of these other smaller countries or Cuba or some of these other places that's been bombarded with so much bad luck here lately, regardless whether it was an earthquake, a flood, hurricane, or whatever, bad disease. A volcano, can you only imagine what those people are facing right now? Can you only imagine the thousands of lives that's been affected just within the past 6 months? Right here in the United States, that I seen on TV, where an analyst got on TV and said because of the cost monetarily damages that happened just within a 6-month period between the two hurricanes that come up through Florida, that was devastating. All of what they done to Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, and North Carolina and Tennessee, and all the damages that's happened out west. In a 6-month period now, a very short length of time, comes up to about $800 billion. That's tickling $1 trillion. Now, if we have done that just in 6 months, what's the next 6 months going to look like? What's the next year going to look like? What's the next 2 years going to look like? We cannot be a self-sustainable country in thinking that we can borrow our way out of debt or stifling other countries because of our mismanagement of what others have done in front of us that has put us in a peril. Because by doing so, we're going to take the boat that's already sinking with 100 little holes in it, and though we may repair 4 or 5 of the little holes, maybe even a dozen, 2 dozen, maybe even half of those little holes. By creating these bigger holes, I promise you, the boat will go down and it'll go down to the bottom. And that is the direction that we're heading right now that could be so devastating with all the people's messed up minds, with all the drugs, with all the violence. You know, probably just about every home's got 2 or 3 cars. Just about everybody's got, you know, several guns that can have guns legally. You're talking about an ordeal that will be the most frightening ordeal that you've ever experienced or seen. And once America goes down, I'm thoroughly convinced of this, once America goes down to the degree that it's total chaos over here, and we start fighting amongst ourselves, which I feel like various politicians has actually wanted. They won't tell you this, that they wanted this, but they actually want this. That way they will not have to stand in front of the people towards being accountable for the people and basically creating a diversion or a delusion to the degree that everybody's running this way when we should be running this way, regardless whether it be some of the richest people in the world or it just be some of your local politics right here in Northwest Tennessee. Now, friends, I'm talking to you from the heart, and I'm telling you what God is showing me regarding all this, just like God had showed me what was happening with the airplanes, boom, plummeting 1,000 feet, and some of them hadn't been just plummeting 1,000 feet, some of them been actually going all the way down to the bottom. Or we've had other miscontrolled situations, like recently just got through happening, that within a 48-hour period, we had 2 times 2 aviation catastrophes in America. Not counting all the other catastrophes that's happening all over the world, even as I speak. So as I talk to Mr. David Mayo and his wife, Clydine, I just pray to God, regardless you be a Baptist, a Southern Baptist, a Methodist, a Church of Christ, Jehovah Witness, a Methodist, a Mormon, or whoever, I just pray to God that you will quit this bickering in trying to compete with one organization against another, and we will come together, because if we don't, what I see over the horizon is not going to be pretty. And once it starts, it could actually lead to what I'm talking about. At last, that great city that taught the rest of the world with all her apparel had come to naught in 1 hour. Now, I don't know what that hour is in the eyes of God. I don't know if it's an actual literal hour. I don't know if the hour represents a day. I don't know if an hour represents a week. But that sounds to me like that's pretty serious. And I've always looked at that. I've always questioned God about that. Who is this? Where it talks about the great city, Babylon, Babylon, the great city has fallen. I mean, I know that there's an actual town over by Washington, D.C., over by Maryland, that actually is on the coast that actually has that same name. And I know that there has been cities in the past pertaining to historical ideologies that some has thought, well, this is what he was talking about right here. Well, is it? Is it what he was talking about? Of other Babylons that has fallen? Or was it something else? Are you willing to take that risk today of avoiding the messenger with this message coming from the Windmill Ministries here at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255? If you are, that's fine. Let it be up on your shoulders and not mine, because I'm going to wash my hands of this situation just like I washed my hands of this election, because I could foresee that we was walking into very, very dangerous territory that I don't even think even the professionals realized that we was in. Now, granted, some of the stuff that Donald J. Trump is doing, as long as it's done in moderation, it's probably a good thing. But whenever you go to choking other countries off and you go to punishing them over your own imperfections or your own inadequacies, then you're talking about it'll be on like Donkey Kong. And I hope to God that certain people in Donald Trump's cabinet members understands that. Because whenever it comes to push and shove, like I said earlier on this video, we are no longer the #1 leading continent of the world. We used to be. Back in the 60s, back in the late 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. Oh yeah, we was humping and bumping and going, man. We was creating toasters and microwaves and doing all kinds of stuff. But at the same time, we was giving away our secrets. We was allowing for the people not just to steal from us, but we was actually giving them that information by TV, radio, the foreign exchange student program, by allowing all those people to come over here after Kennedy passed that law that probably had something to do with his assassination, as well as what went on up here in Kentucky. I didn't realize that Kennedy had created so much anxiety that there was actually posting signs in Dallas, Texas, wanted dead or alive. Yeah, you piss off enough people and it'll be on like Donkey Kong. And I just hope that the American people can see this, and I hope that we're smart enough to moderate out of this. There's no doubt we're in a disastrous mode. We've been in a disastrous mode probably for the past 20 years. It just so happens it's been creeping. It's been creeping up on us, kind of like warming the water with the frog theory. That if you warm the water up slow enough, the frog won't never know that he's in a danger zone until it's too late. I just pray to God that that is not where we're at as a society, because it is. If it is, may God have mercy on us all. Good luck. God bless. God bless our military. God bless our endeavors. And heaven, please help us all. Please remember the victims of those who have went through what they went through this past week regarding aviation. Shalom.